We are still not over this first round playoffs, the absolute mess that the seeding and buys and committee have us in right now. We're talking with Blake Ruffino about it in our video today, presented by BetUS. Blake Ruffino, the Ruffino and Joe Show, also AYS Sports. Blake, let's talk a little bit about this playoff round one. I know there's a lot of talk about all the losers. We'll get to them in a minute, but as our buddy Pate says, let's talk about winners first. Which of the four winners impressed you the most? Was Ohio State, or which team really did impress you this weekend?
It's Ohio State. And look, their dominance this weekend, TJ, does not go amongst me as like, oh, the SEC overrated. Ohio State might win the whole damn thing. They're that talented, right? Like, there's context that's got to be in here. TJ, we've been saying this all year. If they hit on all of their cylinders, if they play to the talent that they have, they are more talented than anybody in the country. Anybody. I don't care what anybody tells you. There's not a position group of matchups of any team that Ohio State can't match you. Their DN, Jack Sawyer, might be their fourth best player. TJ might go in the first round. Right? Like that's the part where I'm saying where you can say Tennessee was ass, you can say they sucked, whatever. Samson going down, they went for haymaker after haymaker, and the best thing that could have happened to them potentially is that they lost to Michigan. They played like a team that has a full thing of mercenaries, and they didn't understand the context of the Michigan game. TJ, they went out there on Saturday. I'm going to be real with you. I'm changing this or next week. I'm changing my national title picture. I don't think that they can be beat. I legitimately don't. I think that they were that impressive. And here's the thing. I have pointed to everybody on the podcast, Joe Burrow. I have seen wide receiver cores look like this before.
Yeah.
Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. They got one. And I'm glad Chip Kelly let that thing air out a little bit. They got to throw the football with Will Howard. They're the best. Man, they're so good. I mean, they could win this whole thing here, man.
Yeah. One thing, and you mentioned Tennessee, one thing that I think gets overlooked and people forget about is when we were about 3 weeks to go in the season, Tennessee was on the outside of this thing looking in. They were behind Ole Miss. They were behind Alabama. And those two teams had catastrophic bad losses. And we'll debate who deserved this, that, and the other. But Tennessee was on the outside of this thing looking in. And they just had a little bit easier schedule down the stretch post Georgia that they didn't have one of those catastrophic losses to Vandy at the end of the year or whatever. And people kind of forget that. Like Tennessee with their warts and all, they were very up and down. They survived their schedule. But they were not. If Alabama doesn't lose to Oklahoma, and if Ole Miss doesn't lose to Florida, or just one of those things, the way it worked out, Tennessee's probably not in this thing.
They're not better than Ole Miss.
Right. And so Tennessee kind of got, I don't want to say lucky. They did what they needed to do. I'm not trying to crap on Tennessee here, but there was a reason that they were behind those other two teams that were 10 or had two losses. And then Alabama pissed down their leg. Ole Miss pissed down their leg, and Tennessee got in. Alabama would have been a better matchup against Ohio State. Do I think they win? No. Do I think Ole Miss wins? No. But they would have been a better matchup had it worked out the same way, and they would have, not had those losses, and Tennessee was on the outside looking in. So we can give Tennessee crap, but we kind of knew who Tennessee was, right? They had a good win against Bama. That's a team that almost lost to Florida, if not for Billy Neighbor. That's a team that lost on the road to Arkansas. Like, Tennessee kind of is who we thought they were. Now, I certainly didn't expect them to get blown out like that, but I don't. When you look at it from that context, maybe it's not as – the score is still surprising. Maybe it's not that surprising, especially when you factor in Samson.
Well, what happened – I mean, everybody – see, people forget stuff. I bookmarked all y'all's tweets when y'all were like, man, if Tennessee goes in here and scores, we got a ball game. TJ, they couldn't score in the third quarter, and then these tweets started getting deleted. Screenshots. Okay, don't act like y'all weren't in there saying, man, Tennessee's starting to make this a little bit of a game. TJ, they didn't score in the second quarter. I mean, it was a dogfight for 3 quarters, and then they couldn't score. They made Nico have to beat them. And it was Styles have made fights in college football this year. But in reference to the Ole Miss thing, I think Ole Miss is better than Tennessee. Yeah. They just so happen to play 3 other ranked opponents, and then they beat those teams, and then they lose to these Rudy Poos because they excel, whatever. So I think that Tennessee is not a litmus test for me on that. But Ohio State's a good football team, man, and they're going to continue. So we'll see what happens with them in Oregon.
I'll get right back to chatting with Blake, but if you're betting on any of the playoff action or any of the bowls that are happening this week, maybe some NBA Christmas Day games, maybe some NFL Christmas Day games, make sure that you are betting with BetUS. Use our code YouTube150. That's YouTube150 for 150% bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your next two. All of that up to $2,000. We appreciate BetUS for their support. Make sure that you're betting with them today. Which of the four teams that won at home as a favorite, which one gives you the most pause and makes, everyone won in dominating fashion, but is there a team that you say like, I'm not quite sold on them yet?
Yeah, and look, this is where you're gonna send this to Joe De Leon, and you're gonna say, "Oh, here we go."
I made it too easy for you, huh?
Yeah, well, it is Notre Dame, and let me put context because people think I troll them because the whole Brian Kelly thing. It's not true. TJ, they had one rush for 98 yards, right? Outside of that, they ran the ball against Indiana for 2.37 yards per carry after that. The reason that they stalled in the red zone, the reason that they had issues is because they couldn't run the football on Indiana. So then I look at them versus Georgia in a couple of a week, and I just ask myself, can you do that against Georgia? Can Riley Leonard throw the ball on third down? Now, I could say Texas, and Texas is probably just as equal with Notre Dame here in doing that. But offensively, I still think that they're dangerous enough to where they can do some things that can really, really change the context of the game in any given moment. But look, man, you had a 98-yard run. And TJ, what if I would have told you going into the game that outside of one carry that Notre Dame would run the ball for 2 yards a carry? What would you have said? Oh man, Indiana, goodness gracious, they really bullying that O-line? And I saw people that I respect dearly come out on Twitter and say, "Oh man, this Notre Dame O-line is absolutely dominating." Bro, do what? Like, do what? Like, that is, I mean, the numbers don't bear it out. Like, what are you talking about? They couldn't run the ball for over 2 yards a carry outside that 98-yard run. The thing, though, about Notre Dame that I look at here, TJ, is one thing is they're going up against a backup quarterback. But I literally have seen Kirby win national titles with a walk-on. Call Stetson Bennett whatever you want.
Yeah.
Gunnar Stockton is more gifted than him as a runner. That is a truth. He ran over Anthony Hill, who's the best linebacker in the SEC. So it's Notre Dame for me because I don't trust Riley Leonard enough to throw the ball on crucial third downs.
Now, I agree with you on Notre Dame. I also think Penn State gives me just a little bit of pause. Now, I think they'll beat Boise State.
Right.
But SMU moved the ball. The difference in yardage was only about 80 yards. SMU just, one, couldn't finish, and two, gave up 14 points. They had 3 drives inside the 10 that came away with 3 points, right? And then gave away, there's 18 points right there you left on the field, and then you gave away 14 by throwing it to the other team. We're talking over 30 points of failures. And I'm not saying they would have won, but to me, on a down-to-down basis, that game was much closer than the final score indicated. Do I think that Penn State's a bad team? No, I'm not saying that. I think they make the semifinal. I think Penn State defensively, back-to-back games. Now, they've made the plays when they needed to, in the red zone and picking the ball off and running it back for touchdowns. But back-to-back games, they've given up a lot of yardage. And I think when they play a Georgia or a Notre Dame, that could be trouble for them. Now, could they beat those two teams? Absolutely. Penn State gives me a little pause, too. I'm much more confident on the other side, the harder side of the bracket, in both Texas and Ohio State.
Well, Allard went up, and Penn State went up against a 96th-ranked passing defense and couldn't throw the football.
Yeah.
The only thing that I give Penn State a little grace on, there's not a quarterback, and I know Jennings threw a couple of pick sixes. They were getting home, and because he said Jennings is an athletic freak, they couldn't get to him. Yeah. There's nobody else in this playoff that's that much of an athletic freak. TJ, he was pressured on 75% of his dropbacks. The reason they didn't have that amount of sacks is because, bro, I don't know how somebody's ankle didn't get broken. He had to run. He was running around for his life, and he made bad decisions. But look, you're right. Penn State, man. They're the Penn State of old, brother. I don't know what to say about them, but I thought defensively they looked really good. It just comes to a point where, you're getting home. You just didn't. You'd not seen anybody that can run like that on you at quarterback, but they made him pay for it too.
Yeah. For sure. Under pressure, and I'm not trying to imply in any way that SMU was like close to winning it, but I did think that, they're going to have to be able to throw the ball. I do think the Genty matchup, like, can he be a little bit of a difference maker to make that game at least more competitive than SMU was? I don't know. Like, we'll see.
I mean, why don't you stack? They're going to stack the box and make them throw the football.
For sure.
I mean, everybody looks at the Oregon matchup and says, "Oh, well, Oregon was flawed in the beginning of the season."
Yeah, nearly lost to Idaho.
Right? Like, get out of here! Get out of my face with that, brother. I think Boise's about to get blown out.
Yeah,
I really think they're about to get blown out.
I do too. I just don't.
Arizona State too.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of hope. Okay, and so let's talk about that. So to me, we're all fighting about this 11 seed or this 10 seed or this, that, and the other. And the committee is just like, keep fighting about that. Or not the committee, but just the people that set up the playoff. Why in the world do we have a sport where a team finishes 9th or 10th and we say, you know what? Let's give them a bye and make them the 3 seed. You know what? Let's give them a bye and make them the 4 seed and ignore the fact that it was the Mountain West Conference. Like, I'm not trying to be the SEC homer. I'll let you do that. But why are we pretending like that Mountain West championship is worth even close to the 3rd best SEC team or the 4th best? I don't know. To me, that's just, we're arguing about the wrong thing, right? And we can argue about Bama, SMU, all this other stuff. The problem is just this format and the setup and the seating and these auto buys. It is disastrous that we're doing this.
Well, and here's the thing too. I'm not trying to clamor for the SEC. Put in Illinois. If Wisconsin had those teams that they did in the past and they're in that same situation, I'm screaming for Wisconsin too. It's not about the SEC. Brother, what if Alabama lost to a 4-8 Cincinnati? Because that's what Arizona State did, and they got a bye.
Yeah.
Like, so you want to poo-poo on Bama because it's Bama. Look, I'm not in that camp. I'm in the camp of, like, things are not created equally. TJ, they poo-pooed all over strength of schedule. And there comes a part, and don't get mad at me at this, it's difficult for me, and I think it's difficult for some to see Clemson, okay, go up against 3 SEC teams and lose. Like, even the ACC to some extent. Like, the ACC went over, or Clemson went over 3, okay? Then you have the Mountain West, and then you have Boise State. Like, Boise State was in a dogfight with Wyoming. So you're mad at Ole Miss for losing to what I'm going to call them what they were, a hot team in Florida. TJ, if I would have told you that Florida would have had 8 wins before the beginning of the season, you would have said DJ Lagway came in and went off. Newsflash to everybody that's out there, the games that they won late were because he made big-time throws late. Yeah. Like, it's not created equally. And I'm going to tell you this. You better get your laughs in now, because there's going to come a time where this is going to get changed, and then you're going to have differences and different seedings and different people in different places. So I don't think Tennessee should have. I'll be real with you. I don't think Tennessee deserved to be in there. So it's not even as if that I'm saying it's just those teams. I thought Tennessee was not better than Ole Miss. But there just comes a part where when I say you're giving Arizona State a bye and they lost to worse teams than Ole Miss. Like, what are we doing here, TJ? What are we doing? Like, that is a joke.
I truly think you should get rid of all auto bids. You should get rid of all, and just put the teams in. And if at the end of the day, and we can agree, disagree, whatever, if you get rid of all the auto bids and you still think SMU is a top 12 team, if you want to put them in at 12, wherever, I don't care. Fine. I'm okay with that. Indiana, fine. It's just the idea that, like, we're rewarding again. And all credit to Boise State. They did what they needed to do this year, right? Like, that's fine. They knew how to get in the playoff, and they did it, right? They won all their games, minus the one against Oregon, and they got it. That's fine. Same thing with Indiana, right? Like, they knew how to get in. They win all your games with Ohio State, and you get in. Whatever. That, to me, that's not – it's just the way that we have it set up. Also, I think this is a huge issue because, do I think Miami versus Notre Dame would have been a more fun matchup? Absolutely. Like that'd have been a better game. Do I think Alabama versus Ohio State would have been better? Yes. Ole Miss versus whoever, Penn State or whatever matchup you want to make for each of those games. Yes, they all would have been better. What I also think is tough is we're in a seat where we're trying to, I said this to Allie last night. We're trying to figure out the answer to an equation that we don't know the formula to. Strength of schedule and wins and losses and top 25 wins and eye test and resume and who's hot right now, all these things. And we have no idea what the what the formula is. And we're trying to get to, me and you are trying to get to an answer. And not only me and you, these coaches are trying to get to an answer of what do we need to do to get in, scheduling and all these other things. And we don't know because it's just a subjective, I think this team should be in over this team, or I think this team should. What do you mean, right? Like what is the actual answer? Do I think that Alabama would beat SMU head-to-head? Yes, I do. But I also think that if Alabama would have lost the last weekend to Auburn and been 8-4, I still think they would beat SMU head-to-head. So where is the line, right? Do we say that if you're only 2 losses behind, then we consider head-to-head? If you're 3 losses behind, we consider head-to-head? So I don't think you can go fully who would win on a neutral site, because I'll tell you the truth, I think Florida would beat SMU head-to-head right now. But you're not going to put a 5-loss team in. So to me, it's just – we get so caught up on, well, this strength of schedule here, this, that, the other. This team only lost 1 game in the Big Ten, so we got to put them in. It's just a calamity from the top down. And so we can argue all these different points, and we can make very valid arguments, but we don't know what the heck's going through those people's head when they're in Dallas and, watching these games or whatever. So I don't know. That's why it's all just a cluster to me.
The only counteract that I have to that is South Carolina. And I'll give you this reasoning. So wait, I went on the road on rivalry weekend and beat Clemson at their place. And then they go because Syracuse upsets Miami and all that. So they go on and they win the ACC. So wait a minute. Because you don't want to penalize SMU because they played an extra game, you put them in over us, and they couldn't even beat a team that we literally beat last week. Yeah. Right? Like, so there are some context to, strength of schedule does. South Carolina, of their last 6 games, beat 4 ranked opponents, TJ. Like, what? What do you mean you can't weigh that? By the way, beat the ACC champion. And here's another thing I'd say here, too. You cannot convince me whatsoever that Indiana beating 1 team above 500, SMU schedule, when they're in a dogfight versus Duke, that it's created equally. There's no way. And it's not an SEC thing. If this is happening to the Big Ten, you can make the same argument. TJ, God forbid if Michigan was still where they were, if Penn State would have had 3 losses, what would we have said? If they lost to Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan, what would we have said? Like, bro, what are you talking about? Like, what are you trying to bring in here? So there also just comes a part where if the SEC fans look at this and say, all right, you just told me that SMU cannot be penalized for losing a conference championship game. Georgia last year, and I get it's a 14 playoff, they didn't lose a regular season game in 3 years. They lost 1 and you penalized them. Then the SEC got penalized for losing a game, but then TCU lost the Big 12 title game the year before. The team that they blew out, they lost the Big 12 and they didn't get in. Yeah. And they still got in. So I feel like if you're an SEC fan, TJ, there comes a part where, okay, so if bad things happen to the SEC, we're out. We're the only one that's got to prove every single week that we deserve to be there. But then other teams can have these other little nuances about themselves, and they'll still get in. I mean, TJ, Georgia last year was 29-1 in their last 30 games, and we kept them out.
Hey, you ain't gonna get no. I ain't crying no tears for this committee after what happened last year. Either. And that's the problem. You mentioned here you exactly summed it up. TCU a couple of years ago, Georgia last year, Florida State last year, Alabama this year. There's no consistency. It's a different script every single year. And so a couple of years ago, you put TCU in, but you don't put Georgia in last year. This year, you're putting SMU in, but you didn't put Florida State in last year. This year, you're leaving Alabama out, but last year you put – to me, it's every single year they go with a different thing, and it's because it's subjective. Everything we're arguing is subjective. Bring back the computers, bring back AI. I don't care who does it. Give us a formula. Head-to-head is worth X. Beating a conference champion is worth X. Every loss you take versus a ranked team is worth X. Every loss you take versus a under 500 team is worth X. Like, yeah, you should be penalized for losing to Vandy. Right. But how much are you rewarded for beating Georgia, the SEC champion? So to me, that's the problem is you can argue it from every angle. They're never consistent. And so give us the rubric, give us the formula to get into this thing. And then we can say, hey, yeah, that loss, if we had a rubric, if we had a formula, we could look at it and say, yeah, that loss to Oklahoma on the road did them in. Like that, by the criteria that was set, that loss to Oklahoma is what did it. They didn't get in because of that. And then we could say, well, I get it, right? But we don't have that. We have subjective people that change their minds every single year, and it's never consistent.
Well, and again, you're now having to convince me, okay, as an example, you're having to convince, like, if I'm South Carolina, if South Carolina had like a bigger logo, South Carolina fans, don't kill me. If they had a bigger logo, you're now trying to convince me that Clemson can go through their schedule and have less than 3 losses. Like that's what Indiana, TJ.
Yeah.
Like, I understand what everybody's trying to say. Here's the laziest argument in college sports from people that do what we do. Well, they won their games. That's all that matters. That's bullshit. That is complete bullshit. Because you know what? I've talked to people around LSU as an example. Watch it and see if they don't schedule Rudy Poo State week 1. It's already happening in the ADMITS. Why would I do that? Why would I go on the road to Clemson if it doesn't benefit me at all? Yep. It's never going to benefit me at all. So again, it comes down to a point where I just, to wrap this all in a bow, I feel like that there comes a place where logic is not equal amongst this. And here's another thing too, to your point, it's not consistent. They have the big guy in the Big Ten that's running this.
Yeah. Well, we had a guy in the ACC running it last year, and that didn't seem to help.
Well, yeah, and he's
but if we and you know how much I hate them. I would take Miami right now on a neutral field over both Clemson and SMU. And I'm not about to sit here and politic for Miami or say they should have been in. They pissed on their leg too.
You're a Florida State guy. That's the biggest thing.
But Miami would beat both those teams, and so I get it. You set up these auto bids and you set up these buys and everything else. And the people that set this up were stupid, right? The way they did it looking back now. But like Miami deserved to be in more than those. They missed the ACC championship on a tiebreaker, Blake. Like a tiebreaker. The 5th tiebreaker in the ACC is what they missed on.
You want to see Cam Ward go up against Penn State. That's the ultimate question.
Man. You're right. Miami deserved to be in more, to me, than those other 2 teams.
I agree. I
hate them.
Right. Well, and it's a joke again, and then there comes a part where TJ, again, if I'm South Carolina, I'm like, this is BS.
Yeah.
This is BS. Brother, we're 4-3 against top. Think about this. Last thing, I swear to God. We said we're going to be 20 minutes. We're in there 40 minutes.
Yeah, every time.
Okay. So here's the thing. I went 5-3 against ranked opponents. Some teams, I play more ranked opponents in a month than the ACC did combined. Think about that for a minute. Think about the Big Ten if you're Indiana. Indiana, Arizona State, and Boise State, South Carolina play more ranked opponents than them combined. TJ, you're almost doing that for all 4 teams for South Carolina. Now you're going to have to try to convince me that it's equal, right? That's where I'm at. So they play 7 ranked opponents. They went, or 8 ranked opponents. They're 5-3. TJ, 2/3 of their games are against ranked opponents at the time that they played them.
Yeah,
that's insane. That is literally insane to think that they did that and that they're not like. Get me out of here before I start cursing on Merry Christmas.
On Festivus during the week of our Lord's birth.
Right. I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah. Rank the 12 teams and put them in. Right. That's all. That's
without a doubt.
Yeah, rank the 12 teams. And then if we have an argument on your rankings, that's fine. If you put a team above, whatever, rank the 12 teams and put them in. We'll still argue about 11, 12, 13, whatever. But get rid of this buy crap. Get rid of this auto bid crap. If there was no auto bid for anything, guess who would still be the top 2 teams? Oregon and Georgia, right? Like that would still have been your 1 and 2. And so I don't know, man. Just get rid of this crap and move on. So Blake, now that our blood pressure's up, now that we got to go to confessional before Christmas Day,
my pulse is 84, brother. People think I get mad. I got a Fitbit to prove it. You know,
I don't get mad. I get loud and mad. So where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
Ruffino and Joe Show. We talk like you. We talk all college football, and then AYS Sports for LSU content, SEC content is where you can follow us. AYS Sports on Twitter. And where I get in stupid rants and people think I get mad and I'm just sitting there typing and trying to invoke chaos.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate Joe. We can give him a hard time too sometimes, but y'all do a great job. You're honestly, like I say this without lying, like you're one of my favorite national shows.
I appreciate that, man. And look, congratulations again. We started, I'm going to end it. 18,000 subs, man. That's insane. Congrats on all y'all's success too, man.
Thanks, buddy. Have a good Christmas, bud.
Y'all too. Merry Christmas.